What would you do when your life hangs in the balance? You pick up the phone to call the police for help? Not once, not twice, but 9 times. Yet the only response you receive is cold indifference. Today's case is not just a story about a crime. It is a tragedy of apathy. Azaka Okazaki, a vibrant young woman full of life, vanished without a trace, only to be discovered in a place no one could have ever imagined. Welcome to the case, 9 desperate calls and the horrifying secret in the closet.
Friday, December 20, 2024, a cold winter day in Kawasaki Ward, Japan. Under the flickering neon signs, people hurried back and forth, preparing for the year-end holidays. But in a small street corner, a tragedy was silently unfolding, initiating a horrifying chain of events that would haunt an entire family. The story began with the strange disappearance of Azaka Okazaki, a young woman of only 20, full of life and dreams. No one suspected that behind her seemingly normal absence lay a brutal crime, covered up by chilling.
Azaka was busy serving at a bustling bar owned by her grandmother. The young woman, with her radiant smile and quick wit, was always a favorite among customers. As the night grew later, the bar became more crowded, but Azaka maintained remarkable professionalism. Her grandmother watched her granddaughter with pride, secretly thinking she would soon hand over management of the bar to her. After her shift, Azaka sent a brief message to her grandmother. "I'm going out for a bit. We'll be right back." Her figure disappeared behind the heavy wooden door, blending into the dark night. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. That night, Azaka did not return. Her grandmother paced back and forth at home, her heart burning with anxiety. She called and texted repeatedly, but only terrifying silence answered. No ring, no reply. The next morning, she rushed to the bar, hoping her granddaughter had just overslept somewhere or gone out with friends. But the staff all shook their heads, saying Azaka had left last night and hadn't returned. A bad premonition began to creep into the grandmother's mind, but she tried to reassure herself that perhaps her granddaughter was just traveling to clear her.
2 days passed, and Azaka's silence became an obsession. Her grandmother began to truly panic. She called all of Azaka's close friends, but no one knew where she was. In her desperate search around the house, her eyes suddenly stopped at the window. The curtains were unusually blown open by the wind. Approaching closer, she was horrified to discover a hole in the glass, as if someone had deliberately broken it to break in. Shards of broken glass were scattered on the floor, like fragments of the piece that once was. Trembling, she picked up the phone and called the police.
The police quickly arrived at the scene. Immediately, Azaka's grandmother provided them with the name she suspected most, Hideyoshi Shirai. He was Azaka's 27-year-old ex-boyfriend, a man who, according to her, harbored a twisted psyche and insane possessive desires. She recounted to the police their toxic relationship that had lasted for a year. Shirai had once been a handsome, humorous construction worker when he first met Azaka at the bar in early 2024. But behind that glamorous facade was a devil waiting to emerge. Rewinding to the early days of their acquaintance, Shirai used his charm and small gifts to win the naive young girl's heart. He frequently visited the bar, timing his visits to when Azaka was working to approach her. Love blossomed quickly, but soon showed signs of instability. Shirai controlled Azaka little by little. He forbade her from communicating with any other man, including customers or old friends. Azaka's phone became his constant companion. He rummaged through her messages, checked her calls, and flew into a rage whenever he saw an unfamiliar name. Control escalated into violence. Azaka's grandmother began to notice bruises peeking out on her granddaughter's face and arms. When pressed, Azaka finally burst into tears and confessed the truth. Shirai was not only unreasonably jealous, but also ready to physically assault her whenever he was displeased. But what was terrifying was that after each beating, he would kneel, cry, swear repentance, and beg for forgiveness. Azaka, out of pity and the vulnerability of youth, believed those crocodile tears, only to fall back into the inescapable cycle of abuse.
Knowing the situation, Azaka's grandmother firmly demanded that her granddaughter end the relationship. Azaka, too, was exhausted and agreed to break up. To protect her granddaughter, the grandmother told everything to Azaka's father, Mr. Teruya Okazaki. Mr. Teruya, a hot-tempered man who loved his daughter, went with a friend to Shirai's construction company. He dragged Shirai out, gave him a severe scolding, and warned him not to come near his daughter again. The father's strong intervention seemed to have ended the nightmare, as Shirai went silent for some time after.
But the peace was only the calm before the storm. Shirai was fired from his company due to poor performance. Jobless and homeless, he moved in with his mother in an old house, ironically not far from Azaka's home. The geographical proximity rekindled the flame of possessiveness within him. He began a campaign of stalking. He appeared on the roads Azaka took home from work, lurked near the bar, using sweet words and a pitiful demeanor to beg her to come back. And once again, Azaka's weak heart betrayed her reason.
They got back together, and Azaka even moved in with Shirai. But a leopard cannot change its spots. After only a short time, Shirai's true colors reappeared, more brutal and tyrannical than before. Unable to endure it any longer, Azaka resolved to break up definitively and moved back home. This time, Shirai no longer used tears. He resorted to psychological terror. He called and harassed her day and night, following her like a ghost. Azaka completely collapsed. She lived in extreme fear, to the point where she couldn't even concentrate on her work at the bar.
Returning to the scene of the disappearance on December 20th, the police conducted a cursory examination and made conclusions that infuriated the family. They claimed the window was still locked. The broken glass could have been accidentally broken by someone inside the house, or Azaka had simply run away due to family conflicts. They ignored the hypothesis about Shirai, didn't bother to take fingerprints from the window, and didn't even bother to look for witnesses. Their superficial and negligent attitude was like a slap in the face to Azaka's extremely worried relatives. Mr. Teruya, the victim's father, did not accept that illogical conclusion. He meticulously examined every nook and cranny outside the house himself and discovered 2 bricks stacked under the window with strange shoe prints imprinted on them. There were also faint fingerprints on the doorknob. All signs pointed to a clear break-in. He immediately reported these findings to the police, but the response was only a weary shake of the head. They stubbornly maintained their initial stance and refused to expand the investigation. The door to justice seemed to be slamming shut in front of this small family. 3 days after Azaka's disappearance, her grandmother's phone unexpectedly received a message from her granddaughter's number. "I'm a bit tired, we'll contact you later." She immediately recognized the abnormality. This cold, unfamiliar writing style was not Azaka's. She was certain her granddaughter was being controlled by Shirai and forced to send the message to mislead them. She reported the suspicion, but the police considered it proof that Azaka was safe and had left voluntarily. They did not know that this was one of the fatal mistakes that would lead to later. In fact, the police's indifference did not start today. Records showed that 6 months earlier, Azaka had sought their help. She had called in extreme fear, reporting that she had been threatened by her boyfriend after an argument. The police took both of them to the station, but in front of them, Shirai played the role of a remorseful boyfriend, saying it was just a trivial argument between lovers. Since there were no visible injuries, the police believed him, released him, and only took Azaka home, considering their mediation duty fulfilled. A month after that incident, the police called to check in superficially. Azaka then said she had broken up and retrieved her belongings. The police removed her from the watch list, assuming everything was settled. But they didn't know that 2 months later, Azaka's father had to report his daughter being attacked. On her way home from work, on a deserted road, Shirai had rushed out of the darkness, pushed her down, and threatened her. He had turned her life into a living hell with endless stalking. This time, he admitted his actions but justified them as being too. The police filed an assault case and requested a restraining order. It seemed the net of the law had tightened, but subsequent developments were incredibly puzzling. On October 29th, Azaka unexpectedly went to the police station to withdraw her complaint, saying she had exaggerated the incident and wanted to reconcile with Shirai. She said those words with a dazed look in her eyes and a trembling voice. The police, instead of suspecting she was being coerced, happily accepted closing the case, as if a burden had been lifted. They had no idea that behind that decision were terrifying death threats from Shirai.
Just one day after withdrawing the complaint, Azaka's younger brother reported to the police that Shirai had broken into their house and forced his sister to leave. But then, Azaka called to say she had voluntarily gone for a walk along the Tama River with him. The police, like puppets being spun around, became frustrated and thought the girl was troublesome. In reality, by the river that day, Shirai had threatened to throw her into the cold water if she dared to resist. Azaka was fighting the devil alone, while those who were supposed to protect her turned their backs due to the inconvenience of administrative procedures. By November, the calls for help became more frequent. Azaka reported being attacked, insisting she had never reconciled. 5 days later, her father reported her missing, suspecting Shirai had abducted her. The police went to Shirai's house, found Azaka there with no signs of restraint, and assumed she was there voluntarily, then left. The situation repeated itself. Azaka was abducted, threatened, her family reported it, the police conducted a superficial check, and then left. Did they not see the fear in her eyes, or did they deliberately choose not to see it to avoid trouble? The climax was in December, just before her final disappearance. On the 9th, Azaka called twice, reporting Shirai lurking around the house. The police told her to come to the station to make a statement. She refused and hung up, too scared. The next day, in the early morning, she reported Shirai stealing her bicycle. 2 days later, she reported seeing a masked man looking up at her room. A total of 9 desperate calls for help. 9 times she tried to cling to the hope of being protected. But all she received in return was bureaucracy and cold indifference. The police abandoned her among the wolves, leading to her permanent disappearance on the fateful night of December 20. Returning to the present, January 2025. 2 weeks have passed. The atmosphere in Azaka's family was as gloomy as a house in mourning. Her grandmother was devastated, sitting blankly by the door, waiting for her granddaughter. Azaka's younger brother, Kotaro, could no longer bear this helplessness. He gathered his friends and went straight to Shirai's house in the middle of the night. Seeing the lights on in his room but no one answering the door, the group of young men intended to break in. Ironically, Shirai's mother called the police, and this time the police arrived very quickly, not to find Azaka, but to arrest Kotaro for disturbing the peace. What a bitter irony. Azaka's father, Mr. Teruya, understood that he could no longer rely on the police. He decided to sell his assets, spending all his savings to hire a private detective. The price was very high, but compared to his daughter's life, it was nothing. At the same time, he posted a plea for help on social media. The father's tearful words moved the online community. Thousands of shares and thousands of encouraging messages were sent, creating a strong wave of public opinion that put pressure back on the investigative agency. February 2025, the private detective brought the first important clue. He located Shirai and believed his phone was the key to the case. Mr. Teruya and his son ambushed Shirai on the street. A brawl ensued in broad daylight. The father and son, with the strength of their indignation, subdued Shirai and snatched his phone. They quickly copied the data before he escaped. What they found in it sent shivers down everyone. There were messages between Shirai and his mother. His mother, instead of advising her son to surrender, was plotting his escape. They know you're hiding at home. Do you need to go home for a trip? Going to America would be good, but no passport yet. These cold, calculating messages showed that both mother and son were well aware of the crime that had occurred and were trying to conceal it. They discussed installing surveillance cameras to watch the victim's family and talked about hiding places. Mr. Teruya, trembling with the evidence, rushed to the police station. Mr. Teruya threw the printed documents of the messages onto the table, demanding Shirai's immediate arrest and a travel ban. He shouted that his daughter might have been murdered and the culprit was about to flee. But once again, disappointment enveloped him. The police glanced over the evidence and flatly stated, "The evidence is not convincing enough." They refused to act. Mr. Teruya walked out of the station, filled with resentment, looking up at the gray sky, wondering where justice was in this society. Not giving up, 2 months later, the private detective again discovered Azaka's missing bicycle lying abandoned near Shirai's house. Mr. Teruya rushed over. In the bike basket were still his daughter's wallet and keys. Clearly, the bike had been brought there by someone. He called the police again. This time, he insisted they take fingerprints from the bike. Faced with the father's firm attitude, the police reluctantly complied. The forensic results? The fingerprints on the bike matched Hideyoshi Shirai.
The net of heaven is vast. Though its meshes are wide, it lets nothing through. But just as the police were preparing an arrest warrant, Shirai's mother reported him missing. Her son had been gone for 2 days. She played the role of a worried mother very convincingly, but Mr. Teruya knew it was a clumsy act. Shirai had fled, just as he had warned earlier. The police's delay had given the perpetrator an opportunity to escape. This news spread, and public opinion erupted. People were outraged by the police's incompetence, demanding a satisfactory answer. Under immense pressure from the media and the public, in April 2025, the police finally officially opened a criminal investigation. 4 months had passed since Azaka's disappearance. 4 months of missed opportunities. A special task force was formed. They conducted a comprehensive search of Shirai's house. It was a 2-story house with a garden, looking as ordinary as any other house. The police searched every room, every drawer, but found nothing suspicious. Hope of finding clues gradually faded.
As the search team prepared to withdraw, a young officer suddenly noticed an old wardrobe in the corner of the room. There was something unnatural about the partition behind it. He tapped lightly, and a hollow sound echoed. After prying open the wooden partition, a secret space was revealed. Deep in the darkness lay a black travel suitcase, emitting the smell of death. The suitcase was pulled out, heavy. When the zipper was opened, everyone present was stunned. Inside were the remains of a young girl, curled up in a painful posture. Forensic examination quickly confirmed it was Azaka Okazaki. She had been murdered about a month after her disappearance, meaning around late January. This meant that throughout the time her family sought help, throughout the time the police ignored the evidence, Azaka might still have been alive, imprisoned in this very house, right in that cramped wardrobe. The cries for help that neighbors faintly heard in the night, the strange noises they dismissed, all were the poor girl's last desperate attempts to cling to life.
News of Azaka's body being found exploded in Japanese public opinion. The raw and brutal truth shocked everyone. Neighbors living next to Shirai's house shuddered in horror, realizing they had lived next to a dead body for months. Azaka's grandmother fainted upon hearing the news and had to be hospitalized. Mr. Teruya was numb, the pain too great for him to cry. He held a photo of his daughter, standing in front of the police station, his eyes vacant, but containing the most powerful accusation.
The media revisited the records. From December 9th to December 20, Asaka had called the police 9 times. The longest call was 20 minutes. She had pleaded, begged, and warned, but all she received was silence. The police had 9 opportunities to save a human life, and they missed all 9. A wave of protests erupted. People gathered in front of the police headquarters, holding up banners demanding justice. A chaotic clash occurred between the enraged crowd and security forces, reflecting a serious loss of trust in the legal system. As for Shirai, immigration records showed he had flown to the U.S. just before the arrest warrant was issued. But the net of heaven, though wide, lets nothing through. Perhaps due to pangs of conscience or running out of money, just 3 days after Asaka's body was found, he returned to Japan. The police had set up an ambush at Haneda Airport. As soon as he stepped off the plane, cold handcuffs clamped his hands. Shirai bowed his head, offering no resistance, his expressionless face making it impossible to guess whether he was remorseful or plotting something. At the investigative agency, Shirai confessed to the murder, but the true motive and details of the crime process remained ambiguous. He claimed he killed her out of jealousy because she wanted to leave him, but the question remains, what role did his mother play in this case? She knew her son had killed someone, knew the body was in the wardrobe, yet she lived calmly in that house, still texting and plotting her son's escape. Was she an accomplice? The police are still investigating to clarify. Looking back at Hideyoshi Shirai's life, one sees a tragedy of moral decay. He grew up in a single-parent family, lacking a father's love. As a child, he was once a well-behaved boy, passionate about soccer with a dream of becoming a professional player to help his mother. In his graduation yearbook, he once wrote hopeful lines about a bright future. But then life's currents pushed him, and indulgence and bad friends dragged him into a quagmire. From a boy full of aspirations, he became a violent, self-absorbed addict within his own twisted ego. In May 2025, Azaka's funeral was held amidst tears and drizzling rain. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects, laying white flowers to bid farewell to the ill-fated young woman. Mr. Teruya stood before his daughter's portrait, choked with emotion as he apologized. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." His apology cut into the hearts of those present. The local police chief also bowed his head and publicly apologized, promising to reform working procedures. Several officers directly involved in ignoring Azaka's calls were suspended and disciplined. The case closed, but the pain lingered. The story of the girl in the wardrobe became an indelible scar in the memory of the Japanese people. It was a stark warning about domestic violence, societal indifference, and the negligence of law enforcement. 9 calls, 9 pleas for help that fell on deaf ears were exchanged for a human life. If only, just once, someone had truly listened to her, perhaps Azaka's smile would still be shining under the sun. Never be silent in the face of evil, and never be indifferent to the cries for help of others. That is the painful lesson Azaka left us.
Justice delayed is justice denied. We hope that the tragedy of the girl in the closet serves as a wake-up call for society regarding domestic violence and the accountability of law enforcement. If you found this video meaningful, please hit that like button and share it to help spread this message. Thank you for joining me for the past 30 minutes. For now, good night and stay vigilant.